And yeah, when I was working more than 30, it was a violation that says, hey, Kevin, thanks for being here overnight. You can go home now. A call for change, fixing a broken medical training system with Jake Goodman, TEDx UGA.
As you finish your Auntie Anne's pretzel, a voice booms over the intercom. Now boarding Flight 292 to Honolulu, Hawaii. You're close enough to hear their conversation. The co-pilot turns to the pilot and whispers, I've been working for 18 hours straight. What about you?
I think we can all see where this is going, yeah?
In nearly every academic hospital in this country, it is not only legal for resident doctors to work 24-hour shifts and 80 hours a week, it's accepted, and at times even considered a rite of passage.
I wouldn't just say at times, I would say widely regarded as a rite of passage. It's a great contrast, right? Why do we have these standards for airline pilots and even truck drivers, but not for doctors? And I think as humans, I mean, we have these biases and we're not very logical. I think part of the reason why we have this bias is that when it comes to planes and trucks and these larger vehicles, either that have passengers or don't, but there are many people around, there can be catastrophic damage and death and harm to many people rather than just one. And maybe because in a hospital setting is just one person, it doesn't have the same level of magnitude, the same level of stick. And then also because, again, humans are very illogical and we're not good at assessing risk always. We don't think that, oh, a doctor staying up late is going to cause issues when they're just doing X, Y, and Z with patient, when obviously it does. And there's studies comparing sleep deprivation or staying up for too long compared to actual blood alcohol concentrations. I think it was being awake for 24 hours gives you a similar level of cognitive impairment as having a BAC of 0.10%, which is over the legal limit.
You see, I have seen countless enthusiastic future doctors, future healers, enter medical training only to be broken down physically, mentally, and emotionally. But what if we could change our medical education system, revamp it, modernize it, humanize it? Not only could we improve the health and well-being of resident doctors, but most importantly, we could dramatically improve patient care.
I think that's the argument that's actually going to move the needle because people don't really care about doctors. Oh, boo-hoo, you have to work hard, blah, blah, blah. And people just see you as complaining. You're making great money. Sure, you have to put in some hard years in medical school and in residency, but you got to do that in order to get to the promised land of being an attending. What's the big deal? Stop complaining so much. And it's not fair, but people have tough lives in different industries, and maybe that makes them feel justified in dismissing the concerns that a lot of medical students and residents have. But when you start talking about their loved ones or themselves going to the hospital and being a patient, and how the actual outcomes can be worse when their doctor is overworked, underslept, exhausted, making poor decisions, more likely to make errors, then I think you're going to get people's attention and actually cause the change that we all want to see.
When I first started, my OG followers consisted of my parents, a few friends, and my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. As the months progressed, the account grew and my mission expanded. I posted about the rates of depression and suicide ideation in medical students. I posted about the inequality that exists regarding the prohibitive cost of medical education.
That's a really good point. Not the focus of this video. If you guys want me to cover that in more detail, let me know with the comments so I can gauge interest.
And in time, I posted about a resident doctor who experienced depression while in training. He shared his story to let others know that they're not alone and that taking medication or going to therapy for your mental health is a sign of a strength, not a weakness. That doctor was me.
Oh, dude, I remember this photo. It was so controversial that, oh, how can a doctor be taking medication for mental health? I hope he dives into this because that was like such a interesting to me that it was controversial.
I am not here today to share my personal experience in medical training. See, I've heard their stories and I've come to the conclusion that there are three major problems that exist in medical training. Number one, resident doctors are simply overworked and not given enough time to sleep or recover. And as a result, we have more medical errors and suboptimal patient care.
Remember there was a study, this is probably when I was actually in med school, that was looking at patient outcomes when you limited resident shifts. So when you have shorter resident shifts, there's more handoff. And when there's more handoff, there are more errors. However, when someone is sleep deprived, there are also more errors. Turns out, at least in this study, that the number of errors and patient outcomes were the same. because again, handoffs introduces some errors, but also being sleep deprived introduces some errors. And I remember there were two sides to this argument, which were very fascinating. One side was saying, if the outcomes are the same for patients, then let residents work fewer hours, help them recover their mental health, et cetera, et cetera. I think a lot of us would agree with that. But then the other side said, hey, outcomes are the same, so work the residents harder. Like, there's nothing wrong with our current system. It's totally fine.
Resident doctors are not given enough time to sleep or recover, and as a result, they suffer, and patient care suffers. 24-hour shifts?
I mean, I've done 30. I've done more than 30. You're supposed to do, like, the ACGME has all these rules. Most residency programs, they're going to bend the rules a little bit here and there. That's just how it goes, especially in surgical specialties. I was in plastic surgery, and I remember one time I was up for about, 33-ish hours, something like that. And after this long shift with overnight call, and it was super busy, and we were doing plastic call and hand call and phase call, so it's called triple call when you're doing all three. So you're just running around everywhere. There's no time for even food. So I'm starving, of course, and I drive to this Thai spot on the way back home. And I remember picking up the food, and in the parking lot, I was reversing my car. And because I've been awake now for more than 30 hours, I almost reversed back into a stationary car, which is very unlike me. And I remember thinking, wow, I probably just zoned out. That was a close call. That if I was moving at speed on a road, that could have been an accident. And after that point, I promised myself, anytime I am on overnight call, I'm just going to call an Uber instead of driving to and from the hospital.
80-hour work weeks? How did we even get here? Here's a brief history lesson. See, much of modern residency training is rooted in a program started by Dr. William Stewart Halstead. He was the chairman of the Department of Surgery.
Really cool book about him. Our med school actually gave all of the class this book to read, and it's called The Anatomy of Addiction. Super cool book, highly recommend it. Talks about the history of medicine, William Halstead, cocaine addiction, Sigmund Freud. Really highly recommend it. It's actually on our reading list at medschoolinsiders.com. The books that we suggest that pre-meds and med students read.
See, back then, resident doctors got their name because they lived in the hospital. They were literally the hospital's residents. They were working 24/7, 365. Dr. Halstead, he had this reputation for being able to stay awake for seemingly days on end without fatigue.
Remember how I mentioned cocaine?
And if he didn't need sleep, his residents didn't either. After his death, it was uncovered that a cocaine addiction fueled his ability to work impossibly long shifts. But by the time this became public knowledge, his teachings had spread throughout the country. Later that year, the Libby-Zion law was put into place, which created the first work hour restrictions for resident doctors. 80 hours a week. Well, it's been nearly 4 decades since then, and residency training has largely maintained this status quo 80-hour work week.
Isn't that nuts? The regular is 40, and people working in certain jobs are going to go maybe 50, maybe a tough week 60, but 80. And not saying that you're going to work up to 80, but no, we have to bring you back down so that it is no more than 80. How nuts is that? By the way, William Halstead was actually at Hopkins on the East Coast, and you're going to notice amongst residency programs, hospitals, East Coast versus West Coast, different parts of the country have slightly different cultures. On average, not always, but on average, the East Coast in these more historic, prestigious programs like Hopkins are going to be a little bit more, they say malignant in the sense that they're going to work you harder and be a little bit more traditional in that William Halstead kind of approach and intensity. Whereas West Coast programs, they're definitely no walk in the park. I was still putting in more than 30 hours on multiple overnight calls, but it's generally going to be less malignant than East Coast programs. Again, on average, going to be exceptions.
Today, it is still legal and accepted for resident doctors to work up to 28 hours in a shift.
And yeah, when I was working more than 30, it was a violation. But again, like, it's a few hours here and there. Oh, you did 32, not 28. Nothing happens. And you, of course, don't want to speak up because now you're coming across like whiny, complainy, whatever. So you just suck it up and you do it. And you stay there until one of your seniors dismisses you, right? And says, hey, Kevin, thanks for being here overnight. You can go home now. And now it's 1 p.m. the next day, even though you've been at the hospital since 5 a.m. the prior day.
All humans need sleep to adequately function and perform at our best. I mean, researchers have studied the effects of sleep deprivation for decades. Research shows that acute sleep deprivation causes physiological impairment in our bodies, similar to being under the influence of alcohol.
Yeah, like I mentioned, the 24 hours, 0.10% BAC.
No, seriously, being awake for 24 hours straight is equivalent to having a blood alcohol content of 0.1, which
There you
is
go.
above the legal limit to drive.
Which is why in that Thai restaurant parking lot, I had a close call.
If it's not safe for resident doctors working 24 hours straight to operate a vehicle, why would it be safe for us to operate on or treat a human being? Some people say 24-hour shifts are a rite of passage or a badge of honor. But do you want to know the truth? They are a recipe for disaster.
Not only that, but when you're so sleep deprived, your memory consolidation, your rate of learning is far reduced. So the argument that many people have for this existing medical training system is that you need sufficient volume. You need to be in the hospital for 80 hours a week because otherwise you're not going to see enough cases. You're not going to learn enough. You're not going to be prepared to be an attending out in the real world. And that's just simply nonsense. The reason it happens, again, starting with Halstead's residency system fueled by cocaine, but the reason it persists today is number one, cheap labor. So hospitals save a ton of money when they have resident doctors work long hours rather than hiring more PAs and NPs and other support staff that should be doing the work that they're forcing the resident to do. And then number two, the whole hierarchy. This is how things have always been done, rite of passage, yada, 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 which is a poor reason to do anything.
I mean, medical training is the ultimate hierarchy. Maybe you've seen this hierarchy play out on shows like Grey's Anatomy, for example, where the surgical interns, they wake up at 4 a.m., they sprint to the hospital, they spend all day trying to outwork each other to get the best surgical cases, all while being yelled at by their chief resident. They get home at midnight, and then somehow they repeat this cycle for years.
I've never watched Grey's Anatomy. I was more of a Scrubs guy, but that sounds pretty accurate to me.
And at times, we tell family members that their loved one won't be returning home with them tonight. There's no medical school lecture on how to grieve. It's on to the next patient. Med students and residents experience rates of mental illness that far surpass the general population.
The question then becomes how much of that is due to the types of people that become med students and residents? Like, are they just more predisposed or is it the environment? And I understand that argument because the people that become doctors oftentimes are more type A personalities, more ambitious, more neurotic at times. And I don't think it's the actual personalities that are attracted to medicine that predispose them to having more mental illness. I think it's primarily the environment of medical school and residency, as Jake is pointing out.
Why do only 16% of trainees with depression seek help? One of the major barriers that prevents doctors in training from seeking help is the fear that they will be unable to receive their medical license in states that require doctors to disclose if they've sought treatment for a mental illness.
Yeah, this is really important. And he's also a psychiatrist, right? So awesome that he is highlighting this because this is such a serious issue that discourages doctors from seeking the help that they actually need.
If you were diagnosed with ADHD and started on medication, is this something you'd have to report? What if you sought treatment for depression after the loss of a loved one in residency? Would you have to report that? Due to the fear of checking that box and somehow jeopardizing their medical license, most doctors in training never seek help at all.
This checkbox was well-intentioned because, we have to protect the public from doctors who aren't mentally fit to actually practice. But well-intentioned, very poorly executed, it has so many negative downstream effects. I'm so glad that Jake is bringing more light to this. This is something that we have discussed extensively. Even when I was in med school, this was a hot topic that came up multiple times, and I just haven't heard too much about it since. So I'm glad that he's bringing it back to light and making a great point here. Very articulate.
We cannot wait for change to occur at the national level. We need to act at the local level now. As we speak, resident doctors are unionizing due to unsafe working conditions compromising their health, as well as the safety and care of their patients. Joining a union provides residents a voice. It also gives residents the opportunity to fight for more humane medical education.
Yeah, the whole unionization discussion is also surprisingly controversial. We break it down in great detail over on the Med School Insider channel, which you can find right here. And there's also another video on this channel where we cover the unionization for residents. You can find that linked below as well.
And if I can ask one thing of you, it would be this. Take a moment to look a resident doctor in the eyes, acknowledge their sacrifice, and thank them. Together, we can shine a light on these problems in our medical training system and illuminate the path towards a brighter and healthier future for students, for doctors, and for patients. For all of us.
Wow, awesome talk, Jake. Fantastic points, excellent delivery. Let me know what you guys think with a comment down below. Much love. I'll see you all in the next one.